Let's get in there, Julie. It's great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
You bet. So let's begin our journey into your work by asking you this. 5 years ago, the pandemic changed our lives, changed everything about so much. How did you get through that COVID era, and how has it changed the way that you live and do things today?
I'm one of the very few people that might have enjoyed COVID, and that sounds terrible. I didn't enjoy, obviously, the carnage of it, but
Sure.
I have six kids, and we live in a small town, and they go to private school. So when everything shut down, it was almost as if I was going through a crazy time in my life anyway, getting divorced, and it was like the world stopped for me, and I was able to just really focus on time with my kids. There weren't outside influences. Like, I don't watch the news, so I tried to stray away from all like the scare tactics of it, and not tactics, but just the threats.
Yeah.
So it almost felt like a wonderful time to like reconnect and remember family, and you know forget the outside influences. So again, I remember it sort of favorably, and I know that's probably not good to say, but it did
Yeah.
remind me of a simpler time, like
Yeah.
when things weren't so scheduled. So
I think I hear that a lot. I hear that overwhelmingly that there's a lot of people that really embrace that time. And I think whether or not, even if you didn't have such a favorable time. I think there were so many changes that were a part of that era, not only globally but personally, because we just had to look within and figure out what was important, no matter what. There
right,
was at least that
yeah,
existential crossroads, right?
yeah, yeah, and you had to stop the distractions. I feel like our lives are so full of distraction that
Uh-huh.
it's like when all the noise is silence and you're just left to sit with yourself, that there's good and bad, I suppose. But I found the good in it. So
Yeah. There was an interview with Fred Rogers at one point, and they were talking about what he enjoyed the most about getting older, and he was just silence, like with all of the cacophony of noise, especially now. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, I wonder if the pandemic would have happened in the 80s, what we would have done, because there was like now we had FaceTime and Zoom and all of these things. And in 85, we still had cassette tapes and five channels and just rotary
yeah,
phones. It was like it was a different time, but
yeah, yeah.
there
And you
was
couldn't order online, or all the
nothing.
adjustments that we were able to make. Thank God with but again, we would have had to make do, whatever that looked like. So
That's it. It had a monopoly on us,
yeah.
that's for sure. So,
Yeah.
to get a handle on what you do on a daily basis, I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds. It's career day, and the curious kid in the back of the room is like, "What do you do for a living?" How do you answer him?
Um, well, I suppose my go-to is always that I'm a mom first. I don't,
Yeah.
so I take care of children in the house, I suppose. But what I do is I'm trying to develop a charity to help women in crisis. So it's in its infancy, and it's taking a lot of figuring out. So a lot of it is just strategic and trying to figure out what's the best way to help people, but I also do a lot of connecting to women who are going through a really hard time and just don't even know where to go. You hit crisis and you don't even know what to do. So basically, to a 12-year-old, I suppose I'm like someone's new best friend who is willing to help and reach out and do the hard work for them. And so that's what I enjoy doing, I suppose.
So, when you were 12, what was your dream life, dream job? What did you want to be?
A mom.
Okay.
And I'm a Xer. So I hid that because
Yeah.
we were told that we should be in the boardroom. And so when people are like, what do you want to be? I was like, um
Uh-huh.
um yeah. So there was a backlash, I think, in the 80s where where you couldn't be in the boardroom. Then it was like, what do you mean you just want to stay home? As if that was lazy or you weren't motivated. So I'm hoping that the next generation can find that happy medium where people do what they want to do instead
Yeah.
of what they're expected to do.
Exactly. I think that was the crux of Gen X. Like there was a part of because I'm in that generation where we were trying to get out of that mold of being tethered to a job and having that freedom and having that latitude and being able to do things in a different way. I remember travel was a big part of that. When I think about that Douglas Copeland book, Gen X, like there were so many levels of that that shattered this glass ceiling that was set up for us throughout our
Yeah.
childhood. you know, and
Right. Yeah,
you
and
know,
traditional roles like mom stays home, dad goes
right.
to work. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it was a play. I think both sexes, were forced to. I think a lot in terms of women because that's my experience. But both generations were forced to re-examine who they wanted to be, what they wanted to be in a relationship, and what their roles were going to be. And it was a time of true turbulence where we're all just faltering. I think that's the millennial generation has come from a bunch of us, whether that's good or bad or a difference. Yeah.
True, yeah. I was just watching a documentary on Lilith Fair the other day and forgot how groundbreaking things were in the 90s. Like how many things were ushered in that were new, that were akin to that kind of um, momentous artistic surge of the 60s. The 90s really did recreate some of that. And I was still surprised at how much marginalization they got in that festival. I mean, all of those performers were major acts, and how much belly aching there was that it was all female and all. It was just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And the crowds were so happy, and there was such an amount of joy that was different. And then you contrast that with that reuniting of Woodstock, full of all that angst and anger, and how it turned into chaos. And nothing like that ever happened with
Yeah.
Lilith Fair. It was always fun and festival oriented and just really centric to like good things, you know? It's wild.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I
yeah.
did just watch that documentary about Woodstock. I think that that's what happens. The original Woodstock was not out to make money.
Right.
If they made money, that, it wasn't by design. But yeah, the
Yeah.
second one was all about the money. So I think anytime your purpose is to make money, that's when you get into trouble. So,
You know, I heard an entrepreneur say that a while back. They were like the best thing if you're an entrepreneur, the way you go about it is solving a problem. You don't go in saying I'm going to make $1 billion. You go in because there's something that you want to resolve and fix. But if you go in
right.
with that idea of making all this money, your karma is already off kilter. It just
Yeah,
is.
well, and you can't be passionate about anything when you're just trying to, count money. And
Yeah.
I agree with you, so that's why, my charity is perfect example. I didn't go into it make
Yeah,
money, so
that's
I'm
it.
I'm perfect. Yeah.
That's exactly what I
I'm
was,
in a perfect place.
what
Yeah.
I was getting ready to say. So take me back to your childhood. What were the kind of the seeds of wanting to be a mother and eventually getting to a point where you have this charity now? What were these foundational elements that have evolved into who you are today?
I grew up in a very small family. It was just my sister and I, and my parents didn't really get along, bless them. But it was a very lonely childhood, I think. My mom they were both extreme introverts. And so I spent a lot of time at home. And again, you're talking about the 80s. So if your parents didn't drive you somewhere, you were stuck at home, looking at a TV. So I think that really shaped me, I'm a pleaser by nature, so I think a lot of my life was kind of just making sure everyone else was okay and pleasing everybody. And I guess that followed through to my adult years, where I've always been a nurturer and a caregiver, and um, I guess no better place than to be a mom. So, it wasn't that that was the only thing I wanted to do in life, but I wanted a big family because I always felt like if you didn't like one person, you'd have more to turn to.
Yeah.
If my two of my kids aren't getting along, there's four more. I'm like, go find someone else.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I love the chaos of it. I love that there's always somebody to lean on and to support. And, family is really, it's not about genetics or who you grew up with. And I do understand that. But there is something very comforting about having a sibling who knows you and it will always be there for you. So
Yeah. So, who's been your hero? Who's been that kind of inspirational force that's allowed you to write your book, to get the message out, to help others that need help?
my daughter, Tatum, well, my husband, who I lost to pancreatic cancer in 2009, the two of them, and that's what the book is about, their struggles and challenges. But she's 24 years old and first she had 40 surgeries to begin with, and then right as she lost her dad, and right as she was getting better, she came down with a rare form of soft tissue cancer. So I've watched her little body. Like I said, she's 24 pounds, less than 4 feet, and I've watched this girl go from one thing to the next,
Yeah.
unimaginable odds. She's not supposed to be here, and yet, she's still here. Every day wakes up, tries to make the best of every day, and cares about everybody around her. And anytime I hit a hard time in my life, I think, if Tatum can do what she does, then who am I to say? I've been given so many blessings that, if she can do it, then I feel as if anyone can, and especially me.
Yeah, my son's on the spectrum, and he's a hero. He's got to work really hard to get over and do things that are just come rote for us, right? For
Yeah,
for neurotypical people, and it's amazing. And it always reminds me of how much the body wants to survive and thrive. Like how there's this kind of evolutionary notion that's put into our DNA sequence that will allow us to do it. I mean, environmental factors. And as you very well know, being a mother and being a parent, we're always wrestling with this nature nurture. Like, how did our kids get this? How did they get this
yeah,
thing that I didn't teach them? Right?
right.
Like, and then
Yeah,
there's other things that you do, they see by what you do, but there's other things that happen. Like I know with my son, there's things that I did not have anything to do with that were totally a
yeah,
part of my childhood. I'm like, how does that
yeah.
happen? It's weird.
I know it's almost like, and so when I lost Colin, yeah, yeah, my children were 6 months to, 10,
Yeah.
and they have so many mannerisms of his, and they say things and they do things, and I'm like, that really is genetic
Yeah.
because he hasn't been around.
Yeah.
They don't really know him, so I agree with you on that. Nature really, really is a thing. I know nurture is extremely, important as well, but I will say that there's something in our DNA that carries on the traits that we have from our
Certainly.
parents and our ancestors. So,
Certainly. So if you can meet one person alive that's an inspiration to you, that's alive on the planet right now, spend some time with them that might help you in what you're doing with your charitable organization or just in general as a human being, who would you love to spend a little time with?
yikes, probably. I don't know if he's alive, and that makes me ridiculous. Probably like somebody like Gandhi. Like, I want to
Yeah,
know what makes people who are selfless tick.
yeah,
That you know that fascinates me, that someone is willing to put themselves through, fire and everything else just for the betterment of human nature. um yeah, I think that would be somebody I'd love to just follow him around for a day.
yeah. That would be fun.
Yeah,
What is it
yeah.
that gets you up every day? When the alarm goes off, what gets you up to do the work that you do as a mother, as with your organization, with writing, your podcasting, everything that you do? What is the motivation to do that?
I've been through a lot of really, really tough things in my life, and I think that it seemed very senseless for many years. If you had asked me 20 years ago, I don't know if I'd have the same impression, but I feel as if, when we have tough times that we go through, it's kind of, I feel a responsibility to take those experiences that you learn and to change the world in a positive way. I had somebody ask me the other day, like, well, because they do talk to women a lot and try and help them, and they said, well, what happens when you get burnt out? And my answer to them is, I'm creating an army of people that will be there for other people. That's the way that the world, I believe, should happen. If you've gone through something really hard, to go back and make it a soft landing for the person that goes through next. And I've always been somebody that if I see injustice, I'm like one of those fair people. And if I see an injustice, it drives me to want to change it and put a halt to it. So that I think I do have that determination just to make things better for, not only my children, I have 4 girls. So, that's always my thing, but really for anybody going through a hard time, because if we all stopped and let our experiences help somebody else instead of them having to recreate the wheel all the time, I think our society would be a much kinder place.
So you released a book last year, Notes from a
Did.
Blackberry. Talk to me about your book.
So my book is about Tatum and, my husband Colin. It's called Notes from a Blackberry because he was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and we had small children, like I said, 10 to 6 months, and Tatum sandwiched in between. So we were just coming off of trying to get Tatum to live. I took her from city to city to repair her throat. We found out there was a lot of medical malpractice, and right as we were rejoining life, Colin was diagnosed and given 2 weeks to live. So, luckily he didn't. He had more time, but we would go down to chemo on Tuesdays, and I thought it was going to be this great time for us to reconnect because we had been running different places for so many years. And he was just so sick that I had a BlackBerry. It's my age. And I started writing Tatum's story because it was so incredulous, the things that she had been through. I would take her in for like a simple cold, and the next thing I knew, she was like flatlining. So I was, instead of the nurses would come up and they make small talk, and I would find myself just kind of like throwing up my story on them. And then I finally thought, I'm just going to start writing it all down. And I don't really know what impulsed me to do it. But as I was doing it, I guess in the back of my head, you don't know why you do things. I knew necessarily that my children would probably never get to know my husband. And they were so young that it flowed into our story, Tatum's story, and then really at real time as he was, going through treatment and the really rough months when, when the cart or the wheels fell off the cart. And I didn't mean to release it to anyone. It was literally written for my children and myself. But after reading it over and some encouragement, I hope that it gives people lessons to learn about, like, if you can look at my situation as a caregiver and give me like, wow, this woman's working so hard, and give me grace to know that I made mistakes, then hopefully as a caregiver, you just always feel like you're never good enough or you're never doing the right thing. You beat yourself up. And I did a lot. I suffered for many years afterward because I never really dealt with the guilt and the shame of not being able to save someone who thinks you can.
Yeah.
So, my hope is that someone will read the book and say, "Wow, she really was a hero," and in thinking that, will give themselves um, the same honor that they would give to me, and recognize that they're doing the best they can, and it's not an easy position to be in.
So if you were to have a dream tonight and run into a 18-year-old version of you that's lived this life, that's accumulated all of this wisdom, what advice would you impart on that young version of you?
I would tell her to stop worrying so much about what people think about her. I've always been very, I believe that the universe keeps beating you up until you learn your lesson. And I have always, since the time I was young, I just wanted a normal family, whatever that looked like. I wanted, the picture perfect white fence, beautiful kids who are all dressed up for the Easter picture. And I was never able to have it.
Yeah.
It's like, no matter how much I wanted normalcy, I could never get there.
Yeah.
And I was so guided in a lot of the decisions I made trying to attain what everybody else thought was perfect, and trying to pretend to everybody that I was perfect, that I stayed in situations that I probably shouldn't have, made decisions that might not have been the best for me. And I would tell the 18-year-old self, like, if you can look in the mirror and be happy with who you are and know that everything you've done with goodness in your heart, whether it turns out the way you want it to or not, then stop worrying about what other people think, because it doesn't matter what they think. They don't know you if they don't like you, or even if they don't like you, it's not your responsibility to, make everybody else like you. That's, someone said to me, what people think of you is none of your business. And I appreciate that phrase.
Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this. Of everything that you've done and overcome and become at this point in your life, what are you the proudest of?
My children.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say, to your credit, what you said before, they turned out well in spite of me.
So let me ask you this. I have one of my best friends, my son's godfather, lost his wife years ago. And losing a spouse is just almost an unimaginable thing. And everyone around, family, especially friends, they're never quite sure what to do. But you're living this journey, and the only thing that really heals is time, the passage of time, and going through those levels and stages of grief. What have you ultimately learned about yourself that was unexpected in this journey of healing and getting to this place? What have you ultimately learned about yourself and kind of your concept of being alive on this planet?
I think I'm stronger than I thought I was.
Yeah.
I think that I grew up, I was always that girl that had a boyfriend. I was a serial monogamous. So, like, I could never be on my own. I was afraid to be on my own. I always had one best friend, and I think, again, it's the same thing, like the craving for normalcy, the craving for having one person to be connected to. After all these years, I recognize that I just need to be connected to myself, and believe that I can do it on my own. That I don't, of course I want people in my life. I love the people in my life, but my stability, my security should never be dependent on anyone else because I know I can do it myself. And that's a lesson that it's taken me a lot of years to learn, but that's the one thing that I has probably been beat into my head that no one will really ever be there for you and show up for you the way that you will for yourself.
So at the end of the day, Julie, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, everyone in your organization, everyone that gets your book, everyone that tunes into your podcast, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm somebody, as I said, that I think I'm strong-willed. I think that I tend to push away help. I think I'm overly independent. And I also think that I'm very good at pretending that things are okay when they're not. Trying to get over that a little bit, ask for help a little bit more. I grew up with a very independent mother who was like, you do it all yourself. And it's gotten me through all of the things I've been through. So I thank God for it every day. But I also am looking to teach my children a little bit differently because I think the person that people think I am and who I really am differs greatly. I'm very sensitive, which you would never know. I'm very introverted, which you also would never know. And I'm not as secure as I come across. I do have moments of panic. So
Well, we have to protect that child inside of ourselves, though, right? I mean,
yeah,
I mean, is we, what, there's a poet, one of my favorite poets at one point said, "We're born geniuses and buried idiots." And when we're young, we have all of this wisdom and wonder, and the world just does all of these things to build these fences up, and we have to protect ourselves, and we have to be relying
yeah,
on ourselves to do that, you know?
yeah,
So,
yeah. I always say like that's why roses have thorns. You
yep.
know, they have to protect the beauty inside. So.
Certainly do. So if anyone wants to get notes from a BlackBerry, they want to learn more about the Colin James Barth Outreach, the podcasts, anything else that's going on in your world, questions, reaching out, where do they go?
If you go to my website, which is Julie Barth, Barth, author, .com, there's tabs there for my daughter who is an artist. The proceeds from all of our art sales go to fund the charity. And you will also find the CJB or the Colin James Barth Outreach. Tabs are all there. You can get involved. You can reach out. I'm the person that mans it. So you can also talk to me directly, and all my social handles are there as well.
Okay, excellent. Julie, this has been great. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work you're doing. What a wonderful story. Best of luck with everything.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you.